What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Draft or pass mid-round wide receivers. So I'll be going over some of the wide receivers going in rounds 5 through 8. That's kind of the range that I deemed the middle rounds. And I'll make the case for either drafting them or passing on them. But first, let's start things off with the stat of the day. As of recording this right now, nobody's gotten yesterday's stat of the day correctly, but there's still plenty of time for someone to get that. The answer was Duke Johnson. For today's stat of the day, through the first 9 weeks of last season, Adam Thielen, Odell, Hopkins, and Julio Jones were the 4 players with the most first down receptions. Who had the 5th most? So we have Thielen, Hopkins, Odell, and Julio Jones had the 4 most first down receptions. Who had the 5th most? Also, a reminder, you can download my rankings and my projections at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. We offer the cheapest draft package in the entire industry and provides more than enough information for you to dominate in your leagues. And with that, let's talk about some wide receivers. First guy is Jarvis Landry. And I don't think that Jarvis Landry will bust this season because I don't really think he can. He's not a player that relies on touchdowns. He's not a player that's really been injured that much. He's probably not going to bust. And if you begin your draft with risky players, you're like, okay, I want to go for it. I want Todd Gurley, and then I want Le'Veon Bell, or I guess maybe vice versa, depending on their ADPs. Maybe you want Bell, then Gurley. You're like, I just took a lot of risk. Jarvis Landry's a solid pick, in the middle rounds. You kind of know what you're going to get. But I likely won't be drafting Jarvis Landry this season. There are just so many guys in this offense that it's difficult to see him outperforming his ADP. Right now he's being taken as the wide receiver 23 in the middle of the 5th round, and my current projection on him is solid. It's 84 receptions, a little under 1,000 yards, and 5 touchdowns. That's like a good year, and it's probably what he's going to finish with. And it ends up being the 23rd highest projection. My problem is there isn't a whole lot of room for him to go over that. I don't really see him being over 1,000 yards. I'd be pretty surprised if he beats the 5 touchdowns by like 2 or 3. I'd be pretty surprised if he got 7 or 8 touchdowns. And I'd be pretty surprised if he went over 85 receptions. So it's a reasonable projection, but not one that I see him crushing. And I'd prefer my 5th round pick to have the ability to break out without an injury. Like, of course, if Odell were to go down, Landry has a chance to beat this by a good amount. But I'd like my 5th round pick to not need an injury. If my pick's going in like the 8th, the 9th, the 10th round, okay. Then we can talk about, maybe the path is with an injury, but not my 5th round pick. The Browns have Odell, Njoku, Chubb. All of those guys are going to get a lot of opportunity and going to see a lot of production. And I just don't see the path to Landry being my wide receiver 2 on a championship team. He can be your 2. But on a championship team, do we really think Landry is going to be your 2? Probably not, and that's what you need from your 5th round pick. So a no for me for Landry. The next guy, DJ Moore. And DJ Moore, as a rookie last season, posted a 55 for 788 yard, 2 touchdown stat line. Not epic. That is not like an epic stat line, but it's pretty good. Pretty good as a rookie in that offense. And he also had 13 carries for 172 yards, which isn't a lot, but it's 17 points, and that's a point a week. So it is just nice. It is nice knowing your guy can randomly just get you those 3 points with rushing because it helps. And that can honestly win matchups with that rushing production. Adding a point a week is really nice from your wide receiver. Moore was a 1st round pick last season, boasts an 88th percentile height adjusted speed score, a 94th percentile burst score, an 89th percentile catch radius, a 92nd percentile SparkX score, a 97th percentile college dominator rating, and a 98th percentile college breakout age. The dude is good, and he just turned 22. He's a new 22-year-old and is already the number 1 wide receiver in the Panthers offense, and honestly one of the more talented wide receivers in the league. He is not one of the better wide receivers in the league because he hasn't shown us yet. I will not sit here and say a guy who just went 55 for 788 and 2 is one of the best wide receivers in the league. But from a talent standpoint, he's one of the more talented wide receivers in the NFL. Cam Newton had the highest adjusted yards per completion in his entire career when targeting DJ Moore last season. Moore was the number 1 wide receiver in the league in yards after the catch per reception among wide receivers with at least 30 receptions, and he saw 8 or more targets in 5 of his last 7 weeks. That's just 2 less targets than Adam Thielen over the second half of the season. Just 2 less than Adam Thielen. The dude got targeted last season. No more Funchess. He's going to expand his role this season. He has my 13th highest projection. My projection right now, I'll just tell you right now, 72 receptions, 1,150 yards, and 4.6 touchdowns. The touchdowns are kind of iffy on Moore. I mean, we really just don't know what his projection should be. Obviously, he's going to see positive regression from the 2 last season. And if he has 72 catches, my guess is he ends up more at that like 5.5, which should be his projection range. So like 5 or 6 touchdowns. So 4.6 might be a little low. But even with 4.6 touchdowns, if you add in his receptions, his yards, and his rushing, he's got the 13th highest projection. Now, do I have him ranked 13th? No, of course not. That'd be really high. If you saw someone with DJ Moore at 13, that would be pretty high. But I do have him ranked as a wide receiver 18. That's 6 spots above ECR and 11 spots above his current ADP. He's an absolute stud. And in the 6th round, that ADP is beautiful. I mean, he's a beautiful 6th round pick. So I 100% sign off on this pick. And it does not mean that I don't like Curtis Samuel. I mean, I have Samuel as the wide receiver 33, which is 9 spots above ECR and 17 spots above ADP. I really like both of them. But Samuel's not going in the middle rounds. He's going more in the late rounds. So that's just an extra pick for you guys. I like both of them. I probably wouldn't draft them both in the same team. I don't think you would want to roll into a week with DJ Moore as your 2. That's probably what he'd end up being, is your wide receiver 2, and then Curtis Samuel in your flex. I wouldn't love that. So I would try and pick one. So if you end up drafting Moore, maybe don't draft Samuel, take someone else in that spot. But if you don't get Moore, go for Samuel. But honestly, I would try and get one of them on your team because they're both being undervalued right now. My personal preference is DJ Moore, but I have absolutely no problems with Samuel, as you can see by my rankings. Next on the list, Robby Anderson. Robby Anderson's currently being taken in the 7th round. He had a pretty disappointing season last year. 50 receptions for about 750 yards and 6 touchdowns. It's not a bad season, but it was disappointing from what we thought he could do. And honestly, the disappointment really is just because of injuries. You know, he missed 2 games and obviously was a little gimpy in other games because of an ankle sprain. And Sam Darnold also missed time and was a little gimpy in some games from an ankle sprain. So it was just kind of a mess from an injury standpoint. But when they were both healthy to end the last season, when they both recovered from their ankles, that offense really started to click. And Anderson averaged 9.2 targets per game over the final 5 weeks. He got 14.2 half PPR points per game over that stretch, which is a really good number, and a really good number from a early 7th round pick. And the Jets have a really sneaky offense this season. I expect Darnold to take a step forward, and I expect Anderson to be the leading receiver and the top fantasy option among their wide receivers, with a good amount of weekly upside. He's a guy that is, I don't want to say boom bust, but he's got a lot of upside. Like, would you be shocked if he just posted a 122 touchdown week? No, because that's just the kind of receiver he is. He's got that T.Y. Hilton kind of mold to him. I don't want to say he's a steal at his current ADP, but I don't ever think you should reach for him. So he's not someone where it's like, got to get him on your team, let's go after him. But I think he's a good pick. You know, someone doesn't have to be a steal to be a good pick. And maybe you don't end up with him on your team, but that's fine. If he's there, you're in the early 7th round, you don't really like the other options at wide receiver, but you know you should probably be taking one because he took a lot of running backs early, I think he's a good pick. So I think he's someone you can definitely draft. So I'll give him the green check mark. Someone that I do not give the green check mark to is Allen Robinson. And he's a guy that I don't believe I've taken in a mock draft yet. And I have him ranked well below ECR and ADP. He's currently the 44th highest projected wide receiver in my model. And honestly, he has a chance to go up a little bit, maybe climb into the upper 30s by the end of the summer. But I gave him a 20% target market share, which is extremely generous if you look at their offense. And even with that, his stat line doesn't look that great. You know, they have 3 running backs that will have a legitimate workload, not only on the ground, but through the air. And they've got a few, you know, I don't want to say gadget players, but some specialist players in Taylor Gabriel and Cordero Patterson. They have a decent wide receiver in Trey Burton. And they've got an ascending Anthony Miller, who I think is going to get more targets than he did last season. So while I think Allen Robinson is talented, and while I really like this offense, he kind of needs to get lucky in the touchdown department to pay off his ADP. And I don't like drafting players where you're like, yeah, but if he scores the touchdowns, okay, but that's with anyone. Anyone can get lucky in the touchdown department. And I just don't want to draft Allen Robinson knowing that that's his path. Because we know it's not with receptions. And if it's not with receptions, it's probably not with yards. He's not really a player that's just going to crush it on like 60 receptions. So then it's got to be the touchdowns. And I don't want to draft him knowing that that's his only out. So Robinson's a pass for me, which honestly is unfortunate because I do like him as a player and I do like this offense. The Bears offense should be really good this season. I just don't see it happening for Robinson. So no for me. Another guy that's a no that I think I've already talked about in a video, but it's Will Fuller. And Will Fuller is just too risky of a pick for me. He's great in best ball. You want to target this guy in best ball. He's the perfect pick because he can explode some weeks and then do nothing for 3. But get your exposure to him in that format if you want to play him. Don't do it in season long. He's a little bit too risky. He suffered 3 hamstring strains, 2 knee strains, a shoulder fracture, cracked ribs, and most recently, the torn ACL. He's been electric when he's been on the field. Don't get me wrong. He just can't stay on the field. He's played 14, 10, and 7 games over the past 3 seasons, and because of that, he's yet to go over 640 yards in a single season. The Texans say he'll be healthy to start the season, but I'll believe it when I see it. Even if he is healthy to start the season, it means he's going to play, but he's not going to be 100%, and I just can't justify spending a 7th-round pick on a player that carries so much risk. Even though there is weekly upside, he is going to be frustrating to own because there will be weeks where he gets you 2, 3, 4 points because he is a high variance player. And he's probably one of the most likely wide receivers to suffer another injury. So Will Fuller, also a player that is going to be a pass for me. But let's get back to a draft. And a draft is Marvin Jones. Jones was having a pretty nice season before he was placed in the IR last year, and he was playing well as both the team's deep threat and their red zone option. So he was going deep, he was being used in the red zone, being used really all over the field. And while I do expect the Lions to run the ball more than we would like this season, I don't think that Jones is a player that needs a ton of targets to be productive for fantasy. He's put together some nice seasons with under 110 total targets. So yeah, you're going to read the headlines all summer. They're going to run the football. They want to run the football. It's just what's going to happen. I just don't think that that's a huge concern for Marvin Jones. He has a secure red zone role. He's not like Allen Robinson, where it's like he needs the touchdowns to pay off. And I have him projected for 58 receptions, 950 yards, and 7 touchdowns. And that sort of stat line is going to be well worth an 8th-round ADP. You're not breaking the bank for Marvin Jones. He's not a boom-bust player. He's going to get you points even when he doesn't score those touchdowns. So I think it's a good pick. He's not going to be someone you have to start because when you're at the 8th round, you've already taken, hopefully, at least 6 skill position players, which means your roster's filled out. So to start the season, you just see. In the 8th round, you're like, all right, Marvin, you're my first guy up for this flex spot, but we're going to put you on the bench a little bit to start the season. We're going to see how this offense likes to operate. And if you don't like what you see, maybe you trade him. But I think it's going to be fine. I think he's going to put together some solid weeks. And I think he is going to be worth his 8th round ADP. So a green check mark yet again for me. And the last guy we're going to talk about today is Christian Kirk. And Christian Kirk is honestly pretty likely to be the Cardinals' top wide receiver this season and their top fantasy scoring wide receiver as well. I love Andy Isabella. It was A.J. Brown and Andy Isabella were my 2 favorite wide receivers. Not necessarily saying they should go 1-2, but my 2 favorite wide receivers of this draft class. And I think Isabella's going to have a good season and a good career. But Kirk is going to be the team's number 1 wide receiver this season. And he's going to be number 1 on a team likely to finish in the top 5 in pass attempts. They're going to throw the football a lot. Kirk was their 2nd-round pick last season. He had a good college dominator rating, a good SparkX score, and extremely early breakout age. Those are 3 things that I look for in wide receivers. Check mark on all of them. Last season was a disappointment for the entire offense. Every single person on that offense disappointed. So it's not exactly shocking that his numbers don't look that great. But this season is going to be completely different. His role is going to expand. My current projection on him is 68 receptions for 852 yards and 5.5 touchdowns, and that's extremely reasonable. It's honestly one of those projections that I do think will increase a little bit as the summer moves along, but even at that projection, which I think, again, is extremely reasonable, it still has him undervalued as the wide receiver 34 off the board, going to late 7th to early 8th round. So get yourself some Christian Kirk. So those are my thoughts on some mid-round wide receivers. Remember, you can download my rankings and my projections at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. We have the cheapest draft package in the industry, and there is more than enough content for you guys to dominate your leagues. And with that is the end of the video. I hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, how about we hit that like button? How about we subscribe if we are new? And thanks for watching.